and she's called Kia, and she's mum, and she was born in 2006. The one next to her now is called Izulu, and that's the one on the left, and she was her daughter in her first litter, born here on the Good Friday 2009, which was, I think you'll find, April the 10th. She had a twin brother called Themba. It was quite interesting. It was touch and go whether they lived. I was on guard duty the other side at a glass door, and in the first week, Kia, who was very, very young, she was only 3, to be a mum, she stopped feeding them. We whipped them out just in time, and Themba, the boy, was very poorly. He had to be packed with hot water bottles and blankets. They did make it, and they were the first white line cubs to be born on mainland UK in Britain, other than West Midlands Safari Park. And, excuse me, when Themba, the boy, got to 2, he had to go down to our breeding centre in Kent, the Wildlife Heritage Foundation in Smarton, near Ashford, because he took a fancy to his sister and to mum, and not only that, Dad perceived him as a threat. Nice story down there. He was given 2 girls, white lionesses, and I'm delighted to say that he was a dad 6 times over. Sadly, we recently lost him. I'm not quite sure why. Very young. It is a great shame because he was a lovely lion. The third white lioness, the one on the right, is called Zuri, and she was born on the 26th of March 2013. So she's just fully grown. She's just a whisker over 3.5, and they're fully grown at 3.5. She is the half-sister of Izulu. Why? Well, Izulu and Themba's dad sadly was found dead in his bed 2 years after their birth. He had an aneurysm in his brain, and he died. Very sad indeed. The father of Zuri is the big white male Moto, who will be let out shortly. And so Zuri and Izulu are half-sisters, sharing a common mum, Kia. Moto is a very interesting story. You can see he came from West Midlands Safari Park, and he's a quite magnificent lion. He's the biggest cat on the park. And when he got to 3, he had a magnificent mane. He was living with the boys, but they perceived him as a threat at West Midlands, and they booted him out of their presence, and he went to live with the girls, and they too beat him up. And if Thabo, the father of the other 2, hadn't died, Moto would have been euthanized. But Thabo's bad luck was his good luck. He came here. He took a bit of time to learn the ropes, but eventually produced a lovely lioness, and he's done a great job. Now, sadly, we are no longer allowed to breed them, and I'll explain why. Allegedly, white lions just come from South Africa. This is by no means proven, because I was quite recently talking to a Zimbabwe gentleman, and they have them there as well. But they have been around for many, many centuries. They were in the Pharaoh's courts a couple of thousand years ago, though I don't believe they were taken into battle. As some potentates used to do with lions and tigers, they were treated more as royalty. But the whole story really, they're meant to come every 30 years, and the royal, they tell you, in South Africa. But the whole story started in 1977, really, in the Timbavati Reserve in South Africa. Now, how you breed them correctly, you get 2 sandy lions, and unless you do blood tests, you don't know. But they're carrying the white lion gene. This is exactly the same with white tigers, whom also we're not allowed to breed. And they mate, and with luck they have white cubs. In the Timbavati Reserve, a pair of sandy lions mated, and mum gave birth to 2 white cubs and 1 sandy one. Now, how they do this, the cubs went missing. How they do this, mums tend to have the cubs away from the pride and take them back in about 10 days to 2 to 3 weeks. They're helped out by aunties. They take them back, and she did that, and they went missing. Now, it could have well been that they were killed by the rest of the pride because they were perceived as an impediment to their hunting prowess. The other thing that could well have happened is they may have changed colour. If you go to where the white tiger is, you'll see the two lions used to live there before he arrived. They were called Takana and Mana, brother and sister, and they were born here on the 1st of July 1996. Takana was given to me at about 10 days. I was told not to raise my hopes. He'd probably died because he had hernias. And I slept with him for about a year every day and nursed him through 5 hernia operations. Initially, we did keyhole surgery, but the last operation was on January the 17th, 1997, when the vet cut him open from the top of the chest cavity and the top of the bottom of the stomach and inserted a fibre mesh. The operation was a great success, you can see, because he lived for over 16 more years, dying aged nearly 17 on the 9th of March 2013. He and I were very close to the end. The photograph of the two of us outside the cat house was of him and me together when he was nearly 2 and 300 pounds. He never ever hurt me, but when I was stopped going in regularly, I used to sit with him by the fence, my arm through, and massage his huge shoulders with my hand. And after about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, the tips of my fingers, if not black, were dark brown. There is a very good reason for this. Lions have 2 coats of fur, and between the coats they have a heavy layer of oil to keep them warm and dry in wet and cold weather, rather the way sheep have lanolin. And it could well be then, because of this oil, that they changed colour anyway. The fact of the matter is they went missing. I'm afraid then that breeders got very, very greedy indeed. If you breed white on white from totally different vicinities, well, that's all right, you're not breeding relatives. But if you breed white on white from the same area, I fear you are breeding relatives. This is what they did. And what can happen very, very quickly, even if they're not close relatives, very quickly they can lose their immune systems. Then they get internal organ problems, and then very quickly after that, they can be born with gross deformities like 5 legs or a tail coming out of the side. So we are affiliated to Piazza, and we're no longer allowed to breed them. So do make the most of them. I'm afraid they are bred unethically and irresponsibly elsewhere, in other places in Britain, in Europe, and in America, and they're bred so in circuses. But we're not allowed to breed them anymore, so make the most of them. They're not albinos. If they were albinos, you'd find that they'd have pink eyes, and they haven't. If you look at Zuri, this may be exaggerating a touch, but she still has got, I think, excuse me, the most delicate shade of cornflower blue eyes. She really is, excuse me, very, very beautiful indeed. Now, occasionally to strengthen the bloodline, they do put in a sandy line, which means they get the result is a split. Now, if you look there at Moto, the big white male, you can see his fur is slightly darker. The others don't agree with me, but I do believe that somewhere down his lineage he could have a sandy line and there could be a split. But as I say, the others don't agree, but this does strengthen the bloodline. Now, the White Lion Trust, who help look after them in South Africa, will tell you that the white lions can hunt perfectly all right. Now, I am a bit dubious about this statement, because if they were in the grasslands, they're the kings of the plains, not the kings of the jungle. That accolade does belong to tigers. If they were hunting on the grasslands, they stand out like sore thumbs. They have been put into a restricted, limited area in South Africa, wooded, where they hunt very, very well indeed. And 2, there is a very interesting anecdote about them. One day in the first week when I was on guard duty, a woman came down and said, well, they are only from South Africa. So I said, well, you don't really know that unless you check up on every single pride throughout Africa that has cubs. She said, oh, well, I was listening to experts who were talking about them the other day on television. They already knew what they were talking about. I reiterated that I was not without just a little bit of experience with lions. I had worked with them for many, many years, but she stalked off in high ill humour, didn't take to me at all. And I should really have added that you must check up too on every single pair of lions that has cubs in any zoo. Why? Well, about 5 years ago, two perfectly normal sandy lions in a Ukraine zoo, mum gave birth to 3 white cubs. So there you have it. Now, I do believe that the food today is a little bit of horse meat. Now, I am aware frequently that horses are valued family pets, but I can see there are quite a few children here, and I wouldn't want them upset, but you're not allowed to bury horses. Come to that, I fear you're not allowed to bury any livestock at all under health and safety regulations to prevent the spread of disease and infection and the animal graveyards from becoming overly filled. If you wanted to give a tiny Shetland pony a funeral, it would be incumbent upon you to cremate it. And that would cost you in the region of £500. Anything bigger might cost a lot more. So it really does make sound common sense to put them into the food chain. But I must stress again, for the benefit of the children, they're not deliberately killed to feed the cats. They've died in hunting accidents, they get broken legs, they get twisted guts, they get arthritis, they die of old age or simply hernias. So it really does make sound common sense to put them into the food chain. Now, we also feed beef or calf. When we do that, sadly, we have lost big cats at animal parks with a feline equivalent of VSE. That's FSE. So when we feed beef or calf, we take off the heads because I fear it's the brains that cause the disease. Now, if you're really on the ball, and I'm not for a moment suggesting you're not, you might well ask, what about the backbones? Why? Well, the backbones do contain the spinal column. That too is the source of the disease. Now, when I came here 20 years ago, we didn't take the backbones off because we only had one tiger, Rocky, over to the left, and 2 jaguars, 2 previous jaguars to the ones we've got now, one of which was black and is now in our breeding centre in Kent, the Wildlife Heritage Foundation in Smarton near Ashford, that could eat through the bones. So we didn't take them off, but for safety's sake, I'm delighted to say we now do.